Hey, what's going on, guys? Fico here, and welcome to another edition of Investigating True Gaming. Sit back, relax, get a cup of coffee or hot chocolate or Sierra Mist, because this one's going to be a long one, mainly because of the read. This one is provided by Bungo1138, and the question he asked about 170 days ago was, why do gamers defend violence so fearlessly? You can go to the time of the video if you want to skip straight to my opinion and then just go read it yourself, but if you want to listen, just go ahead and stick her. This conversation stems from my reading of an opinion piece on Polygon Today by Chris Planty, in which he condemns Battlefield Hardline for glorifying militarized violence. One of the comments states, "I see where the author is coming from, but complaining about excessive violence in a video game rings hollow unless you're fair, and apply this to most other FPS games." To which Planty comments back, "You're right, I think violence is an issue in most shooters." Article begins by describing a situation in which the author sat down with his wife, apparently an ungamer, to play Bioshock Infinite, a game that had intrigued her for some time. She made it about 15 minutes in before she decided to turn it off, citing the excessive violence as the primary reason. The questioning of the violence found in video games is something that has existed for a very long time. Shortly following the events of Sandy Hook Elementary School, there was a lot of concern about what had pushed the shooter to go into such a horrible rampage, and eventually the media looked at violent video games. Publishers even went so far as to meet with Vice President Joe Biden. Ultimately, it was decided that video games weren't the real issue and that the government had no interest in pushing any sort of agenda on the gaming community. Around the time, IGN hosted a roundtable discussion video about this. Several editors, including then EIC Casey Lynch, felt that instead of running from the issue, gamers needed to actively participate in these discussions, essentially stating that if we want our voices to be heard, we need to be civil and be willing to debate the issue. Ultimately, this post stems from Chris Plant's article on Polygon about Battlefield Hardline. I found the link on my Facebook feed. I tend to stay away from Facebook comments for what will undoubtedly be controversial articles. See most Polygon op-eds. But for whatever reason, I read them. They were about what you'd expect and mostly contain comments like, "There is a difference between games and reality. Polygon should know that." And, all jokes aside, it's a video game. Hell, cops have looked worse on a lot of video games. People need to chill out and stop being butthurt for just about everything these days. Goddamn special little snowflakes. These types of comments do exactly what Casey Lynch at IGN were saying that we shouldn't do. They're running from the issue at hand and are unwilling to discuss the fact that excessive violence does exist in games, and for many people it is an issue. Granted, Facebook isn't exactly a greeting ground for thoughtful conversation, but even Polygon's comments, which are much more thoughtful, followed a similar, although much more articulate form. I'm curious as to why you think we, gamers, are so passionately unwilling to discuss excessive violence in games. How do statements like "violence doesn't affect us" make any sense when the community so violently like they need it in their games? And this is an edited part. I want to bring the conversation back around to the issue. Do games need to be violent to make the point they're making? Does the experience of Bioshock Infinite require excessive violence to tell its story, to make its point, to be fun? If so, what does that say about the gaming culture? Now, I apologize if that was a long read, but I'm gonna go ahead and now give you my opinions about the whole thing. And going back to the main question, which is at the very top, why do gamers defend violence so fearlessly? Now, I'm happy that he mentioned that gamers weren't, and gaming culture itself was not a reason for atrocious acts, and I'm glad that Joe Biden and people up top of the government understand that video games, they're not linked to violent acts. I mean, it's only coincidental that the people that commit these acts are people that play video games. It's a big, very popular genre. If you think about it, it's in the same odds of a person committing an atrocity and happen to have also been watching TV or happen to have also watched a movie. And if he didn't do any of those things, guess what? He just so happened to have been eating a certain kind of cereal that's very popular. You bet that they will find a reason to blame something for this. And I'm also glad that this is a very, very well thought out, put out subreddit post, and this is the true nature of why I love the True Gaming subreddit. And I'll get to the questions, and I say that I'd like to address the first one is like, how do statements like violence doesn't affect us make sense when the community so violently feels the need to defend it in our games? And he's curious as to why he thinks that we as gamers are so passionately unwilling to discuss excessive violence in games. Well, the answer to that question, I think it goes back to the source of the blame when it comes to video games. The people who are unwilling to talk about it, it's because the people I think who want to talk about it are mostly people that are condemning it. I will go on the record by saying I don't give one iota of a crap of what Polygon has to say. I know that Polygon writes articles to cause controversy. I know they're all political. I know they don't give a crap about gaming at all. That's just my opinion. Last year taught me a lot about what their politics were really into. If they gave a crap about gaming or gamers, they would have not done what they did last year. But that's just my opinion. So I'm not going to take the word of Polygon's article under advisement, but I am going to say that most people who try to shy away from trying to have conversations about this is because they always find themselves on the wrong end of it. They're always finding people who are condemning the violence because it's the violence. It's for the same reason that they condemn movies. It's for the same reason that they condemn music, because of its content. They don't play it, they don't see it, they don't give it a chance, and then all of a sudden, oh my god, they're gonna flip their shit and they're not gonna ever give that game a chance. So if anything, I think the reason is because violence is so tied in with video games, and video games have made themselves to be violent as a way to kind of just add to the telling of the story, almost as a way, I think, to kind of sort of differentiate itself between it and movies and music, you know, sort of like a game mechanic that you tend to see in games. They feel that their culture is getting offended. I mean, when people hear stuff like, oh, why do video games have to be so violent? They'll almost hear it as that, at least I would think it's like someone who's just insulting my pastime because apparently it's too violent for you to like or understand. So that's kind of the direction that they go in when they think about it. Gamers are passionate. I think a bit too much passionate for a fault. And if you remember anything about last year, trust me, gamers are very, very passionate. And when they're told that their gaming culture is killing their culture themselves, they are killing gaming culture, which I'm not going to refer to what that is, obviously they felt very passionate about it. Now, this is definitely not as big as what happened last year, but you could tell that, you know, people get mad. I mean, when you go into witch hunts to try to investigate whether the game did in fact cause somebody to shoot up a school or bomb a building, they're always going to be mad because they're going to get lumped into that same group. That's another reason why I think that they defend games furiously for its excessive violence, because I think they defend the games overall. They don't like to see people misunderstand the gaming culture, and people who see excessive violence in these games, at least in my experience, they oftentimes don't play video games and sometimes just overthink about everything, and they then start thinking about the people that do play these games. Oh my god, what must these people be like? What must these people act like? What must these people who play these violent video games, who must enjoy killing? Oh my god, we gotta be afraid of those people. And then they end up being the most normal human beings on the planet. Well, somewhat normal. But I mean, normal's kind of overrated in my opinion. But in my opinion, normal is not what to some people what you is normal, but other people is not normal. Normal is not something that's real. There's no such thing. I mean, everybody will think everybody's normal. I don't think that the Bible thumping Christians are normal. They think I'm not normal. Nobody in the world thinks anybody's normal. I mean, people from other countries look at us and go, my God, those people are not normal. So obviously, when you're told that you're like a freak or you're different, or, you know, they tell you that, oh my God, what do you like that so much? Obviously, it's definitely going to hit it personal because, you know, it's just sort of like, I think we perceive it as a attack. And I don't think I mean, honestly, I find myself in that situation. I also find myself in this situation before when I was young too, and people would always be worrying about it. I mean, I sat down with somebody who was playing video games, and then their dad was like, I don't see what the point is. It all looks like killing. And I told them that's just the way the developers created the game, and those are the rules of the game. The point is to have fun. If you enjoy that means that the game developers achieved what they wanted to do. And it is for you to have fun. The point is to have fun. And people, when they are constantly bombarded with comments like that, I mean, do we need to open up the avenue and maybe discuss this? Maybe, but the people like Polygon that bring this up all right and do nothing but condemn the gamers for liking games like this instead of kind of analyzing it or just taking the points. And, you know, given the fact that they claim they're gamers, I would think that they would understand better than anybody else. But of course, you know, they're not out to, you know, defend gaming. They're out to make money. They're out to definitely strike some controversy. That's what they're good at. And of course, that gets clicks. That's clickbait, and angers people, gets them to share it. I've wasted enough time on people and sites like that, enough from before last year, and I'm not doing that anymore. I know I keep bringing that up, but I'm sorry, but okay, that was like my overall response, I think, to the main Brout one. Now I'll go to the edit ones, and in the conversation, do games need to be violent to make the point they're making? No, I don't. Even despite everything I just said, you could do it. You could tone it down. But just because it's not toned down, it doesn't mean it'll make the different point. Maybe that's the point. I mean, games often do it on purpose. And in the case of Bioshock Infinite, like what my friend Victoria would say, he almost felt as though the mechanics of the game were there just to remind you that Infinite was a Bioshock game. And I think he has a lot of good points in his video when he starts analyzing Bioshock Infinite. I really wish he'd go back to making those videos, because I think that those videos were going somewhere and he was getting to that. Does a game like Bioshock need to be that violent? No, I think it could have been just fine because the story was amazing. But there were moments in there that the violence was definitely necessitated in order to bring the points. There were some scenes there that definitely do require the use of it in order to get to hit and impact the story. And that's just my opinion, because I mean that was excellent. The violence never really bothered me all that much because I've come to see it from Bioshock games before, and as an FPS gamer, I'm also tend to get used to this sort of thing. But it really doesn't require it to, you know, to make the story excellent. There are some moments where I think it's granted. There are some cutscenes where you kind of have to admit that you've seen Booker DeWitt and you've heard that he's a killer, and all of a sudden you kind of get those incredibly graphic moments where you see, my God, this guy is willing to kill you however way he can. This man is just a straight up murdering machine, and I think that those scenes add to that. So I'm gonna say part yes, part, no. If it had been toned down and the story had been the same, I still think it would have been an effective story to tell. Maybe the moments where they don't show him do the really violent stuff might downplay him, but if they accentuate it with the story, then I wouldn't have found any problems. Here, I don't have any problems, but Bioshock Infinite was just such an amazing experience, and with it, as you saw, all the violence in it, I didn't have a problem with it. And I even called it the Game of the Year when it came out, and I'm convinced that game is still one of my favorite games, mostly because of just its amazing, just a story. That's just my opinion, though. Now, he also asks, it requires excessive violence to tell a story to make its point to be fun. Yeah, you know, I think it's just a matter of just how games are being made. I think that studios tend to take the route that they know the best, and they tend to know that, you know, games that are nerfed and are toned down tend to be less enjoyed because they're not getting the same experience. This sort of kind of happened with Mortal Kombat when they replaced some of the fatalities in the first game on the SNES, and also it was sweat instead of blood, and before you know it, it was allowed because that's what the gamers want. If gamers don't want violence in their games, I'm pretty sure that the companies will probably turn it around and give them less violent experiences. But hey, you know what? You could also tone down the violence in these games as well too. And most people seem to forget that there's also gore meters in these games too. But do they have to be excessively violent for it to be fun? If you don't need the excessive violence for it to tell a good story, I'm sure that you probably don't need it. But again, if it is part of the story, it doesn't make much sense to have it for its story and not keep it for the rest of the game. I found Bioshock Infinite to be fun even with it. I think in most games that do accentuate it to be dark stories, it kind of is a bit of a requirement. And that, to me, I think it doesn't turn you away from the gameplay as well. It doesn't need to be there, but the fact that it's there, it doesn't bother me at all. It might bother some people, and I guess why those people I feel that are inclined to it, but I just think that we've gotten to the point where it's just kind of normal and it shouldn't bother seasoned gamers. Now, new gamers, I can see, but there are games that are not like that, and obviously, if they're younger gamers, they obviously couldn't play them. And that falls into the parents' responsibility. And if so, what does that say about the gaming culture? And that's the last point that Bungo brings. What does that say about the gaming culture? I think that I don't think it says much about the gaming culture. I mean, if you're asking if we were to enjoy excessive violence in video games, what does that say about us? It would pretty much ring the same way if it wasn't there. Because the gaming culture is constantly misunderstood. Last year, it was pretty much dead, according to people, including Polygon, and that wasn't even about excessive violence in video games. They'll pick just about every and any reason to consider gaming culture dead, and that, again, I'm sorry to bring it back again, but honestly, if we like excessive violence in our games or tell its story, all that says about our gaming culture is that we just like it when it's a little more grisly, when it's a little more dark, and we enjoy it. And guess what? That, or with or without it, does not make us vile people. I mean, I've played tons of violent games. I've played Doom, I played Quake, I played the Gears of War games, I played No More Heroes, I played Mortal Kombat, I played Killer Instinct when it had the fatalities in it. I also played tons of FPSs. I used to play Far Cry. I also play Borderlands, and tons of these games are littered with violence and don't affect my life one bit whatsoever because I've grown up playing video games. And people who have grown up playing video games will enjoy these games regardless. Now, if that says that we're just into violence, well, It's the same reason why we like horror movies. It's because people who like horror movies like that it's there because it's part of the experience. And that's ultimately what I think it boils down to. We know it's a part of the experience, so our gaming culture, I think, I don't think it says that we're terrible people. It just says that we as a gaming culture have accepted that video games could have violence in it like that, and we'll probably still enjoy games like that. We see shows like The Walking Dead, which is one of the goriest shows on TV. It baffles me that a show like that is on national television. Shows like Breaking Bad we're also there, and that is something that I think is part of the experience. We as people have learned that we could expect sort of these things like that, and others have been okay with it because that's just sort of part of what it is, of what the entertainment's about. It just means that we've just got used to it. It doesn't say that we're terrible people. I mean, I think what people who don't understand the excessive violence in video games, it's just that they think that, like I said before, they think of us as being very violent individuals. And most gamers that I know, I mean, they can be aggressive, they can be very emotional, but the thing I've not seen them be the most, at least through my part of the woods, is violent. Can they get angry? Yes. And believe me, I've seen them get very, very angry, but it never boils or escalates to a different point. Gaming culture, if it has nothing but excessive violence in it, it still will not be linked to anything terrible that happens because it doesn't matter. Because the people who, I think the person who committed the atrocity in Sandy Hook, he was playing StarCraft, and that is a game that is not excessive in violence at all. Yeah, it has blood in it, but trust me, StarCraft 2 wouldn't even rank in the top 500 most violent games of all time. Trust me, I do not think that a game like that would qualify. And it apparently got blamed for the atrocities that happened. So it's not just games with Call of Duty, it's not just games like Gears, it's not just Doom. Any game that gets mentioned will come under fire. Excessive violence getting taken out of video games will not change this trend. If you were one day to decide that you wanted all excessive gore and violence taken out of all the video games would still get blamed. So what do I think of that, if it's fun or if it's vital to a story in gaming culture? I personally kind of indifferent overall, because either way it will not change gaming culture. I think gaming culture will just continue to be as obsessive with with gaming and as a whole. I doubt that excessive violence is the first thing they think of when they go and buy a video game. Maybe at first when it first came out, but because we got so used to it, it just became part of the rules of play. It doesn't need to be there, and I think we would get used to it, but gaming culture is gaming culture. I don't think it's worse if we like it. I don't think it's better if we don't. So that's just my opinion overall, and that ends my very long opinion about this whole entire thing. And I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and like to thank the Redditor Bongo. You did a very good job posting that thing. I hope that he got a bunch of comments. I'm going to leave the link down below for his subreddit, so you can also go to his subreddit and give it an upvote and like it, and even your opinions of it, and also leave your opinions here in my video as well, because I want to know what you guys think about the questions that were brought up. What do you guys think? Does excessive violence needs to be essential in the story? Does it need to be in it to make the game fun? What does that say about gaming culture? What do you guys think about it in Bioshock Infinite? Think about all these things and all the questions that were brought up earlier, and if you want to answer them and leave your opinion, leave them below as well. I'm very curious about it. So thank you so much for watching again. I'm thanking you guys for watching so much in these videos, and of course give it a like if you like, subscribe, and follow my Facebook if you want. And as always, my name is Fico, and that was my gaming mind. Bye bye.